So students are wondering about how you got to this. So why don't you come on back and let's discuss this.
Sounds good.
Bill, and I'd love to start with you. We just saw a great example of how an entrepreneur went about setting a startup's pricing framework. And I'm sure our students want to do as good a job, even better. How should they think about this process?
So first of all, we had the framework here. But one thing we didn't talk about is how important it is to get your business model right before you do that. And that was a step we talked about earlier. And I think it's worth, just asking Kit, did you guys think about other business models? Did you think about subscription models of like constant revenue that you're getting by making it convenient to go to them, like a Dollar Shave Club or a Birchbox or something like that?
So we always knew that we wanted to design, make, manufacture, and sell our products. The difference in the business model for us is kind of how we sell it. And you touched upon subscription model, which we thought about. And one thing that we had an issue with that was we felt to commoditize the product if you're always kind of getting a new t-shirt every single month. The other business model, which is common in our industry, is selling through other retailers. So selling through Macy's and selling through Nordstrom. We don't do that. We're direct to customer. And that business model very much influences price because when you sell through a wholesaler, they dictate the price a lot of times because they know they want a certain % margin. And by selling direct to customer, we have a lot more ability to dictate a lot of parts of our business and our product and our price.
You want to control your fate.
Yeah.
So it sounds like, Bill, you're hinting at the fact that your earlier choice of the business model is absolutely critical for your pricing.
Yes, I think it's important. We have these four things that Kit has stepped through: value proposition, DMU, DMP, type of customer alternative. But behind this, there's that question of cost. It's simple to do cost. But cost is not a factor. I just want to reemphasize that again, and you saw Kit did not talk about it here. All cost is a floor that you can't go below.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing that in Kit's entire discussion, I don't think you used the word cost once.
Wasn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
She must have had a good instructor in school.
The best.
I wonder who that was.
But I think that's really important. Cost is just a floor. She's selling value. She's selling the experience. That's the whole story about Ministry of Supply. And that flowed through to their thinking about pricing.
I want to ask you about cost and your pricing process. It's probably natural for most entrepreneurs, especially those starting out, like, hey, what is our competition charging? Let's just charge a little that. Did you have any kind of intention to use cost as a significant driver in your pricing framework?
I think cost is kind of an easy out because it's a tangible number that you know. And when we talked about this framework, there was a lot of intangibles, there was a lot of emotion, and those are really a lot harder to quantify. So I think it is really easy to say, I'm going to think about cost. But as Bill mentioned, we're not in the cost game. We're creating a great experience. We're creating value. We want to be more aspirational than kind of pricing for cost. So we really tried to avoid that as a big factor.
When you said that your price is $128 and you use the adjective initial, so it sounds like your price right now is different. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so one thing that we got really excited about in pricing and talking to pricing professors at MIT is that it doesn't have to be a stagnant thing. You can really test, you can iterate, and it can really be a process. So when we set 128, we kind of expected to then play around with it. So we had 128, then we went down to 88, and then we ended up landing on 98. So at 128, we were getting a lot of customer feedback saying, this is really high, it's an investment. At 88, we were getting no feedback, which made us think this must be too low. And so we brought it up to 98. And I think that one thing that's been kind of fun for us is kind of the merge of art and science.
Yeah.
So you notice that all of our prices end in 8, just because we kind of like that. We think it's lucky. We think it feels nicer.
Whereas most behavioral economists would say 9 is the better number because people like prices that end in 9 because they want to buy before it goes up to the next price point. But you've made yourself different and unique in that, not just going with the pack, and that's very interesting.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that's very important for all of our entrepreneurs out here is that they went out with a price and then they continually test. They continually test. And this is something that you see with companies that are good at pricing. and entrepreneurs, they're constantly figuring out what the right price point is. It's not one point in time. And they say, well, at 98, they should have just started at 98. Well, in fact, I like the fact that they tested higher and they walked down to get there, because they made, just by being the difference between 98 and 20 and 128, that's $30.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of money for a startup per shirt. And they could do that and walk down to that. And now when you get it at 98, the people feel good because they knew that at one point it was 128.
Right.
And they have all that money in the interim. But I think what you're also seeing here is once they move to that new type of customer, they knew there's a price point there of the 2 digits before you go to the 3 digits. So this 99, which to them is 98, with your kind of Ministry of Supply pricing strategy of 8s, not 9s, is really makes a heck of a lot of sense.
And I think that, to your point, and to go back to kind of our business model and how that influences pricing, is because we are direct to customer, we are really have a close relationship with them. So we can hear that feedback, we can react really quickly. And if we want to test pricing, we just have to change on our website. We don't have to deal with hundreds of wholesalers and going out and telling them we're going to change pricing. So for us, it made a lot of sense. It was very easy, and it was a really good way to really understand.
So you can
our
innovate
strategy.
rapidly.
Exactly, yeah.
And I think that's a really good point. Kit is the person who runs the stores too for Ministry of Supply. So she's right there with the customer. So her having pricing is something that's very appropriate. Now you have to be careful, because if you give the person who's running the stores the pricing and they're not, as vested as Kit is, being a co-founder of the company, they might just drop the price to make their job easier. But in this case, Kit is a co-founder with a lot of equity in the long-term interest of the company, and she can get that right price point because she's so close to the customers. What's not good is setting your price by just sitting in spreadsheet land and optimizing it based
Seeing
on
where
that.
it all connects.
Yeah, and some office where you're not talking to customers. Kit's out there at the front line talking to customers and using her analytic skills, but being driven by what's that customer saying. And I think that's why it's so appropriate she's here for the pricing discussion.
Oh, absolutely. And I'd like to dig deeper around your earlier point about feedback. You said when your price was 128, everybody told you, hey, maybe it's a little too high. And then when it was 88, you didn't get any feedback at all. So what feedback are you looking for to get a sense that the price is right? What is that signal that you are expecting?
We want to know that we're creating value for a customer, and that they feel it's a price that they're comfortable paying, but that they also feel like they're getting a lot more value than they're paying. And then we also want to make sure that we can be an impulse purchase and we don't have to be a huge investment. So that was a lot of the conversations we had with customers revolved around, like, how'd you hear about us? How long did it take for you to buy us? Would you buy again? Would you tell a friend about it? And we're finding that the price at 128 was actually hindering a lot of people from telling their friends, because they thought, my friend wouldn't pay this much for a shirt. And as a startup, that word of mouth and being able to tell your friends about the product is really important.
Yeah, it fits into the COCA that we're about to discuss in the next episodes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
perfect lead-in.